everyone, and welcome once again to the Ancient and Dilapidated Comic Vault. I'm Captain Logan. Today I'm going to tackle a miniseries that came out between 2015 and last year. This is Batman Europa. This was a 4-issue, as far as I can tell, kind of out-of-continuity miniseries, and I really wish we would do more things like this. This is just after the New 52 period, kind of gearing up into Rebirth, and this is written by Brian Azzarello and Matteo Casali, with some really interesting and varied artwork by Giuseppe Camuncoli. I'm sure I absolutely botched that. Anyway, so this is, as I said, a 4-issue miniseries that takes place over 4 different cities in Europe. We start off in Berlin, and then we go to Prague, and then we go to Paris, and finally we go to Rome, and it's a story about Batman getting this horrible virus that's going to kill him in a week, and he discovers the Joker also has this virus, and each of them has been infected by the same person. Initially, Batman assumes that the Joker has done this to him, and all roads seem to lead there, and then eventually all roads, of course, lead to Rome, and Alfred kind of has the sense initially that it's the Joker that's at fault, and that's kind of the big villain's master plan. By the way, as I have been doing lately with the Vault, I'm going to spoil a lot of things with this and give away the ending, so I'll tell you a little bit about this before I do that, and that might give you a sense of whether or not you'd like to read this, and then I'm going to give away the things and go a little bit more in depth, so you might want to turn the video off before that if this intrigues you and you want to read it for yourself. But anyway, this is a really interesting, unusual kind of story, and I'm a little bit surprised that it came out now. It reads like something that you might have gotten back in the, I don't know, early to mid-2000s, certainly pre-52 days, and like I said, one of my big takeaways was just, I wish we'd do more things like this. This is a really kind of classic Batman Joker story, and it's, I mean, I say classic, it's a really odd piece of work, and it's certainly art-wise, it gets really surreal, and it's kind of a Bermejo-esque thing, especially in like the second and third issue. Let me talk about the art for a little bit before I go any further with this, because I think that's part of what I would recommend this for. It really looks like 4 different artists. It's the same guy doing this entire miniseries, but he's using different artistic mediums, and I mean, we start off with a really kind of standard pencil work, but I mean, the coloring is kind of unusual. I mean, it certainly has its own style, and it's really atmospheric all the way through, but it starts off with kind of, you know, your standard medium for a comic book. It's pencils, and it looks like it's even maybe colored with colored pencils, but it's probably colored in a computer. It's difficult to tell. And then the mediums get, you know, varied and really creative as it goes along, as Batman and the Joker descend more into their virus-induced madness. And, of course, obviously, the Joker is already crazy, and it's always somewhat arguable as to whether or not Batman can be considered crazy. But the idea is they're starting to kind of lose, especially Batman, you know, starting to kind of lose grips with reality a little bit as it continues, and at the very least trying to keep their heads as this thing keeps getting to them both mentally and physically. And so the art keeps getting kind of more and more surreal until we get to the last issue, and that lightens up a little bit, and I kind of question that choice. But anyway, into the second issue, I'm not even sure exactly what I'm looking at here, if it's like more pencils with maybe some of this is painted. It's difficult to tell what exactly how exactly the second issue is done, and then the third is definitely painted artwork, and it's real surreal looking. And then the fourth issue looks to me like, and of course I'm not an art guy, so I'm just going with my experience reading comics and my gut, but then the fourth one really looks to me like pastels. So anyway, it's a really moody, brutish, atmospheric book that is a lot more oppressive looking than the actual story and writing is. This is one of the more upbeat Batmans I've read in quite a while. He's not jokey, he's not super jokey, but he's a little bit snarky, he's a little sarcastic, and he's more human than I tend to see Batman, especially in recent years. There's one point where the Joker makes a point about his not having a sense of humor, and Batman kind of objects to that idea, and I kind of agree with that in this. He obviously doesn't get real personal with the Joker and other characters in this, but he's got a good internal monologue where we learn some things about him, and that at least, for the sake of this story, or maybe a little bit new and things I wouldn't have known. I kind of like the idea that Batman really likes Paris, and that he would consider moving there when and if he's forced to retire. Like, if Batman's in a wheelchair, Paris is where he would go. And there are a few things like that Casali and Azzarello throw in here that I kind of question about the Batman I know. I think this gets away with a lot of stuff because it's kind of its own thing, and as far as I can tell, it's not really in any continuity. We get a really classic Batsuit without the yellow symbol. That's just the black with a blue cape, and it was the first time in a long time where we weren't stuck with a particular kind of Batsuit that had its own connotations with stories that Snyder and other people had been writing recently. And it doesn't mention any particular stories or even particular events that happen. There are characters you're familiar with, and Killer Croc shows up at the beginning. By the way, we seem to do that a lot in Batman stories. If there's going to be a random villain that Batman fights for 5 seconds at the beginning of a story, it tends to be Killer Croc. Anyway, but it's really kind of outside of time and continuities, and so he's able to get away with that kind of thing. But it's interesting because the Joker also loves Paris, but for different reasons. And he turns out, I'm getting ahead of myself, but it turns out that the Joker has this like cult of Joker followers that are like washed out actors and people that live in Paris. And Batman starts to learn some things about Joker that he didn't know before. That Joker apparently doesn't spend all of his time in Gotham. He actually has traveled the world, and there's at least this one pocket of people that love the Joker, and he weirdly fits in well in Paris. And I don't know if that's yet another writer, or in this case set of writers, making fun of the French and how backwards people seem to think that French culture is, that's the one place where the Joker fits in. But I kind of like the idea that his city and Batman's favorite city are different, or are the same. And one of the things I really liked about this is all of despite the fact that I don't know how important at the end of the day it really is that this story is told in Europe, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but I like the idea of going to these 4 cities and paralleling them to Gotham, and talking about the kind of dual identity of cities and the dichotomy and their two sides. The gritty part of the city and its violence and its terror, and the lighter good side of the city, and its culture and its history, and the places in which even the culture and history can be really, really scary, bad things. And the idea is supposed to be that cities, and this is a real standard Batman thing with Gotham, but it was interesting to see it with other cities, the idea that the city kind of reflects the human condition, that just like human beings, there are two sides to every city. And it does kind of make a lot of sense to go to Europe because Gotham is, of course, a Gothic city, and so you're kind of seeing some of the places that inform Gotham and in different ways. And so, like I said, I'm not totally sure that the story itself isn't just kind of a cookie-cutter framework in order to go explore Europe and for these guys to make some statements about these cities and talk a little bit about the histories and things. And Europe becomes essential only in that, as far as the actual mystery goes, only in that the clues where the big bad guy leads Batman and the Joker to the answer to the big mystery all have to do with the places where they're going, especially at the end when we have a Trojan horse thing, which is real obvious, but then we have toward the end a thing about Julius Caesar and both the history and the play, and that leads us to Rome. So I haven't actually come out and said this, but maybe it's become obvious in my synopsis of this that Batman and the Joker end up having to team up in this, and it turns out about the way you would expect, but it's kind of fun to see these guys forced locked together in this journey, and it's not just Joker constantly making jokes that Batman doesn't think are funny. It's real kind of thoughtful and introspective about both of these characters, and Batman is discovering again things he didn't know about the Joker, and and ways in which the Joker is too much like him, and that bothers him, and at times he seems to almost forget that the Joker is this raging, this psychopathic serial killer, because he's had this relationship with him for so many years that you have this rivalry. And we talk about this a lot with the Joker and Batman, that we have this rivalry that starts to get kind of cloudy and muddied and looks as much like a romance as it does like an arch nemesis kind of situation. So now I'm gonna start giving some more stuff away. I'll go ahead and go kind of issue to issue for a second. First issue, Batman and the Joker discover that, or Batman goes to Europe and finds the Joker, and we think that he's responsible for the virus. And then in the second issue, we discover that each of them have the virus, and that they are and they have to go to Prague, and they discover that each of them has clues that the other one doesn't have, and that they have to team up because they're both going to die in a week if they both don't work together and give each other what they have. And so, of course, the Joker kind of holds Batman back because he continues to murder people and things sometimes because that's what he does, and but Batman has to use him because he has this other piece of the puzzle. And they end up fighting a bunch of wooden robots, which is crazy, and these things they're kind of a steampunk kind of thing. And then we get to, which is fun, although I really question why the big bad guy sends those after them if he doesn't want them to die yet. I mean, he at the end kind of expects that maybe one of them would have died by now, but why have clues and like send these messages to the people that you're after if you're not gonna, if there's a chance that they might just get killed by wooden robots? That felt a little bit padded to me. It is part of the mystery. It does lead to a clue, but they're really kind of deadly, and I wondered about that. But anyway, then you get to the third issue, and they face the villain head on, but we don't know who it is yet. It's still someone in disguise, and the big villain, it looks like Batman and the Joker simultaneously. He's got like a Prince music video thing going on, and he says that I am both madness and intellect. I'm both of you put together, which I question because I would kind of argue that the Joker is sort of already that. It's not like the Joker is just an insane person and nothing else. He wouldn't be able to outwit and outsmart Batman so much if he wasn't if he didn't have intellect. So I don't know, I question that. And then in the last issue, we finally reveal when we go to Rome, because again, all roads of course lead there, we finally reveal who the big bad guy is, and it's Bane. And I love the art there. It's a really cool take on it. He's as menacing looking as he ever has been, and it's cool kind of seeing him through this haze that Batman has as he's as he's being afflicted by this illness. So I like the idea that it's Bane and everything that means. I like the idea that Bane has gotten to the point where he's past wanting to prove that he can be better than Batman and take everything that Batman has and be kind of the king of Gotham, and now it's sort of this love triangle of wanting to be Batman's real arch nemesis so that he can then prove that he can best Batman, to trying to prove that he is as more worthy of the arch nemesis title than the Joker is, because he can be both Batman and the Joker. I like that idea a lot, and we've been doing the last few years Batman or Bane dressing up as Batman quite a bit. We did that some in 52, and it's really consistent with what with what the Nightfall guys were doing with Batman, or with Bane, excuse me, back in the early 90s, Alan Grant and those guys. Because, again, Bane, in a lot of ways, wants to be Batman, but he's not about trying to help people or save the city. He's about proving that he is a master of himself and everything around him, and that he's like the ultimate human specimen. He's the ultimate at being more than the sum of his parts. And so I like the idea that Bane has fully embraced the idea now that he is mad. And he, in realizing who Batman is and how much the Joker defines him, he has to be both Batman and the Joker simultaneously. I think that's a cool idea. We don't do enough with it. That's revealed in the last issue, and then Batman takes Bane down, I don't think too easily, but very quickly, and so we don't get to explore Bane's part of that, and it ends up, I don't want to say degenerating, but it ends up being about what Batman Joker stories often are about, which is Batman questioning whether or not he should let the Joker live. There is kind of a new twist on that, where Batman has an opportunity for change, which he of course doesn't take, because that would mean the death of the Joker, and even though this is kind of on its own and maybe outside of continuity, it would be a little bit self-indulgent for these guys, I think, to kill the Joker here. But the kind of twist on it is that it turns out Batman and the Joker are both each other's antidotes, and part of what Bane is doing is trying to kind of playing on the idea that he's trying to do this poetic justice thing with the idea that Batman and the Joker both need each other, and they know it, and the rest of the world is just their playground, and everything else revolves around them. And so he says, okay, if that's how they want to play this, then I'll make it so the only way they can survive is with each other. And Batman can let the Joker die if he simply lets himself die. And the Joker even points that out at the end. Batman's upset because he let this girl die that Bane kind of forced to help him deliver a clue about the virus. Because early on, at first, Batman thinks that the virus is just in his computer, but there's actually a virus, a genetic virus in himself, and that's the first clue. And there's a moment in the third issue when Batman's not looking, where the Joker apparently lets this girl die. I don't know if he directly kills her, but it's talked about as he lets her die. And Batman walks up on it, and because Batman asked the Joker to save her, and of course the Joker doesn't do that. And Joker claims that she was already like that, because of course he does. And I'm not really sure why he is surprised or any more angry about this than he is about anything else. He hasn't spent any time with this girl. He doesn't really have any reason to care about her over anybody else. And I'm not saying that Batman shouldn't feel bad about that, but it's the Joker. Like, yeah, he can be predictable, but this is unpredictable, but this is the way in which the Joker is predictable. Of course, he's not going to do the Batman thing and save this person just because she's a human being and he should have regard for life. So I don't really know why Batman seems as surprised about it as he is, and it just sort of feels like we need a linchpin for him to get really angry and upset in the scene and to consider letting the Joker die by letting himself die. We also don't bring up the obvious alternative to that, which would be for Batman to take the Joker's blood and then let him die, because that would be pretty easy for him to do. It's not like the Joker is, like Bane, his physical equal. I don't think it would be that difficult, and it doesn't seem like it takes that much. By the way, there's a lot of gruesome imagery in this book, and one thing it does at the end that is, at the very least, unhygienic is they kind of slather each other's blood like all over them, and they kind of have to lap it up in order to save themselves. And I feel like Batman, again, as kind of grotesque as it would be, Batman could pretty easily just get some of the Joker's blood, because I mean he beats the crap out of him, and kind of just because it makes him feel better, and then he could just take some of his blood and drink that like a vampire, and then let the Joker die if he wants to, and that wouldn't count as killing the Joker, but he saves him. And so, as we often do, we have this question of, does he do this for the greater good, or does he do it for himself? Is it an ideal? And it's complicated, because it can kind of be both. Like, does he save the Joker and let the Joker live because it's an ideal where he's afraid that if he kills or even lets people die on purpose, it will lead him down the road of being mad and insane like the rest of his villains, like the Arkham villains, or does he do it because he's trying to set an example and because it's the right thing to do? And that's kind of the question we're left with at the end, like we often are. It does kind of read here like that. He's torn, he's conflicted, but it does kind of read like the Joker and Batman are very much two sides of the same coin and complete each other, like the Joker says in The Dark Knight. And Batman kind of relegates himself to, we've been doing this dance forever, and there's a moment where he walks into a room full of people that seem to have been hit by Joker toxin, and he's like, I like this a lot. There's some really thoughtful writing in Batman's internal monologue, like I said, and there's this great moment where he says, I've come upon this thousands of, and then he stops himself and he says a lot, many times. And it seems like at the end he kind of relegates himself to, this is the dance, this is the life I lead, I can't let the Joker die. And it's weird because I do feel like he kind of has an out he could have taken if he really wanted to, and it might not, and it wouldn't really be the same thing as just killing the Joker. I'm not saying that would be the right thing to do, but I'm not totally sure what I should take from the fact that he doesn't any more than any other Batman story. It does kind of end in a pretty typical way with those two. So I really like this story for the artwork. I think it's really moody. There's a lot of wonderful gothic imagery, a lot of really grotesque imagery, and I particularly like the third issue when it starts to get really surreal, and we feel like we're looking at the world from the perspective of these guys that are on their way toward death, but also in this really gothic medieval aesthetic. You know, it kind of feels like we get to see Batman from the eyes of Europe, although it is all kind of from his eyes. It's kind of like how Batman sees Europe, but it's him in that element. And so I think the idea is supposed to be that he weirdly fits there as much as he does in Gotham, and it would be interesting to do a follow-up or a different kind of story even where you see how people in Europe view Batman and what exactly that is. I feel like at the end of the day this could have used another couple of issues, and I wish we had really explored Bane's psychology, because that was one of the more interesting ideas here for me. I really enjoyed Batman and Joker's relationship. The tete-a-tete there is really good, and I think this is one of the better Jokers I've read in a while because he's funny again. Eric and I have been talking a lot lately about how the Joker doesn't really get to be funny anymore. We don't get to laugh at him or with him. A lot of puns here, and he feels like, again, a real classic Joker while still being really sinister and scary and a menace and a complete psychopath. So anyway, that is Batman Europa. If you've read this, I'd love to know what you think about it. And in the meantime, I'll be back again with another vault shortly. I'm going to keep trying to knock out some recent and semi-recent things mixed in with some random single issues and stuff from the past. If there's anything you really want to see me review, and especially if there's anything that you know has ended that I probably have or could get my hands on recently, leave those in the comments. I have lots and lots of catch-up to do because I haven't been reviewing a lot of completed stories in the last really few years, so trying to get back to this, and I'd love to know what you guys would like to see me review. I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.